Hi, everyone. Welcome to Open Studio. I'd like to thank N'Kai for coming on today to talk about their work with us. I really appreciate it. For the critique crew we have on, we've got Liana on, Jared, and Renaissance. Once again, thank you very much. And right now we have Simon, who is recording and also editing our videos. Thank you to you as well. And I'll let N'Kai roll in with the segment, start out with their artist statement.
All right. Hello. So my artist statement for this collection of works. This collection of works is made up of 2 series and a couple of standalone pieces. They come together as a group commenting on my mental health and the state of the planet. The first series is titled Gods of My Own. I created these gods not for religious reasons, but instead to express the power that my mental health has over me. I created these gods during a time my mental health was at its lowest point. While there are 7 pieces, there are actually 8 gods depicted. The King, Red, Melissa, the 2 unnamed, Kriya, Alt, and Fate. The gods represent my struggle with anxiety, eating habits, romance, fear, self-image, art, and abandonment, respectively. The second series consists of 3 titans representing the earth, the ocean, and the minerals and earthly resources. The trio initially was going to include a 4th, air, but was left out. Resources, where am I? Sorry, I lost my spot. The titans are depicted being captured by humans, referencing the way humans claim these resources as their own without thinking about the consequences or decimation of the earth. The last 2 pieces are about self-image and identity. The first a painting of myself with a warped face, and the second unfinished self-portrait, but with only the legs and part of the arms exposed, touching on distortion and hiding my true self.
All right, thank you very much. So jumping on from there, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint. Open Studio, the video cast, episode 2, N'Kai DeLauter. Let's go.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes?
So, I know you mentioned what all the gods were for, and under their names, you mentioned like their specific, like what they represent to like you and like their meanings. So what exactly does the gatekeeper represent to you? Like what does that represent to you? Because like in the image, it shows you, like if you could scroll to the gatekeeper one.
The very first one.
Yeah, it's like the very first one. Because I saw a very like, it seems like, because in your work you use yourself a lot, because these are like a representation of like yourself and how you cope and like deal with all these like different things and emotions. The gatekeeper seems like a very like comforting figure to you. In this.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it just looks like a very like a comforting figure, even though it looks very sinister in its appearance.
The gatekeeper is kind of is like the one that houses all of the gods, following this. So the order that they're in is the order that they were created. So this was the very first time made, and he like the I don't know, the one that represents all of them, I guess. So like within him, that's why I'm kind of like being sucked into him, is like, so within him is where like that world exists and stuff like that. So he's the gatekeeper because he's the one that kind of keeps them in, but I don't know, is like the entranceway, is like how I can like close them off, but also access them as I needed.
Okay. And each of these different figures, these gods of your own, are they different like personality traits of yourself? Can you remind me? Or are they different emotional states?
So if you want to go ahead and like flip through them, do you want me to tell you as each one comes up?
Sure.
Yes. Okay, so this is Red. He is, of course, it says the god of starvation and suffering. And while it does have 2, Red is the dark figure in the background. While I just have those 2 skeletal forms, those are actually just representations of me. So this was kind of the god that represented my struggles with like my eating habits at the time. I was having a really hard time with, making sure I was eating enough. I was pretty much, it's about body image kind of problems, and also just kind of like depression kind of can do that to you. You forget to eat, you forget to take care of yourself. And so I kind of gave it a name and a figure. It's something that's always like looming over me, something I still struggle with to this day, but it's getting better. So I wanted to create something that kind of showed like a shadow-like figure, something that's always kind of behind you and it's always looming over your shoulder. I've also, a lot of these creatures are not brand new to this world. Like I've used them in works before this, mentioned them in high school. And he kind of also represents just like looming fear. So that's pretty much like what he represents.
Okay. Would you like me to move on to the next one?
Yes, let's.
All right.
So this is Melissa, God of Love and Sacrifice. So this was during a time where I was like having a lot of weird. What's that?
I apologize. My phone's going off.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
So this is like the God of Love and Sacrifice. And at the time I was kind of going through a time where I was really unsure. I like was having some issues with like my romantic relationships and also like loving myself. And so that's why she's kind of drowning in her sorrow, I guess. And as you can tell, a lot of these works are very large. This one's 7 feet by 3 feet. These are not even the largest pieces I created. So the next series is where I make the largest pieces I've ever made and probably will never do again. But yeah, so that's what she is. You can go to the next one if you'd like.
All right.
I would like to ask something.
Yeah.
Going off of like figure and referring figure to convey like emotion. I'm reading my questions off my phone.
No worries.
Position and pose of the figure work well in your favor of conducting ideas within the overall body of work and individually. But could you elaborate or define how you like use position and gesture of the figure to like define specific emotions?
Yeah. For example, I can take this one up. So I gave Melissa kind of like that S curve to show like softness, but also struggle. I mean, she is drowning, and so I didn't want. She was not like a figure that's in power. Something that I still like believe in my figures is that like while they are creatures that are holding on to these like negative emotions, they're not necessarily like coming after me. It's like they feel this emotion as much as I do. So it's not like they are trying to like throw it on me. It's like they're just parts of me. And so I felt it was necessary to show within each figure that they are not necessarily like evil gods per se, but just like embodiments of those emotions. And so like here she's it shows like she's powerless, she's struggling. So I didn't want to do something that was like stiff or showing like any sense of power. In the last one, Red, like he is just as frail and skinny as you would expect for someone who's like starving. And if you want to go to the next one, like here, these are the two unnamed. These are gods of fear and false security. So false security is the one that is blinding the other one with false eyes. So I found that this position was quite important to me. It shows like false security is pretending to protect fear, which is hiding kind of like within false security. So I kind of used what most people use to comfort themselves, which is like usually like finding comfort in another person, physical contact, hugging. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of why I went for this position here. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I don't really know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was sort of open-ended.
Yeah.
Specifically with the unnamed one, this one right here, what was the underlying inspiration for the figure in the back?
Oh, the one with the like bird nose?
Yes.
Okay, so that I think I was trying to go for like a and when you use the words false security, it shows like usually like false usually means like, fake, hidden, masked. So I wanted to give it like a masked identity, something that you can't quite tell what could be underneath. You just kind of assume, because all the figures look like me, so like you would assume it has the same face, but you genuinely don't know because you can't see it. And so I wanted to go for something that seems like it shows all, but is actually hiding quite a bit. Also like hiding fear under something else, kind of like sometimes you disguise your fear as, anger, sadness, flashing out. So I wanted to show it kind of protecting fear, like disguising it, hiding it from, the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And compositionally, we could say that this definitely is heaviest on to the right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the addition of the lighthouse in the background balances it very beautifully. And I think it's interesting to point out too that there is no light in the lighthouse. Is there any like deeper or metaphorical meaning to this as well?
Well, so all my creatures exist in the same world. Like I said, they're all within the gatekeeper, the king. So like, while this may seem like an imaginary world, this is very real to me, because this is something that for a while I was mentally ill to the point that this world was very real to me. So I'm very good at knowing reality from not reality these days. But back in high school, this was really difficult for me. And so the lighthouse was something that exists on an endless beach. There is no ocean, so it's just a lighthouse on an endless beach. So a kind of lighthouses usually show boats like, where land is, and in some cases where home is. And a lighthouse that's out can show no one where home is, can show it pretty much is useless. You don't know where the sea is. You don't know if when you're in the sea where the land is. And so when a lighthouse is out, it can cause ships at sea to crash into the land. If you're on land, it can cause, especially once in such a barren area, it shows that like an unused lighthouse on an endless beach means there is no sea to be found. There's no use for it. And so it kind of represents just like an endless wasteland, pretty much, endless emptiness. It took me a while to figure out what it meant, but that's where I think it means to me. And fear, who is hiding under false security, is pretty much buried in the sand here. Like that's where it lives. It cannot move from there. So yeah, that's pretty much
okay.
That's pretty much where they live, I guess.
Would we like to move on? Does anybody else have any questions or?
Yes. I don't know if anyone else. It might be like how my screen is, but I'm like 90% sure it's not. It sort of goes with one of my questions with how you choose to manipulate the mediums that you use. In this one specifically, there's like sort of this effect around the lighthouse where it looks like it could be trees or like mountains or something. I don't know if anyone can see that. Can anyone see that too?
No.
Yeah, I see it.
It's like warped from the
I see
canvas.
it too.
I think
So-
it's an effect of the material used.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I did make the background kind of, I washed out some like black ink to give like the background, like you really don't know what is out there. So yeah, so it means easy to think that like, it could be mountains, could be further land. But yeah, what else were you saying?
I was wondering what sort of, like, is there any intention in the way you manipulate because in each piece I see, it's not like always the same. So I'm wondering if there's like any specific intention in differing the way that you choose to use the ink wash and other materials.
Yeah. So this series, they are made up all of the same thing, but like you said, I did manipulate them in all different ways. So the materials I use, the canvas is not canvas. It's actually newspaper that's gessoed, but they're taped together with scotch tape, or not scotch, masking tape. And so like in this one, you can see the line of where I did tape two pieces or a couple pieces of newsprint together. I like to show like that this stuff is disposable, that, you know, while it does represent a part of my life, that this is, I guess this is an important thing to me, but to others that don't understand it, this means nothing. So I kind of wanted to show that like, this is just like garbage to somebody else, I guess. Cause I kind of had some struggles with like being able to talk to other people about this, and like express to other people in a way that they understood properly. In high school, I had a lot of problems with people understanding my work, and usually they would just ignore it, move on without paying any attention, because it was unnerving to them, it was creepy to them, so they didn't want anything to do with it. So in a way, that's kind of, I feel like that's what that meant to me. And this one particularly, I kind of ink washed it in a way to kind of add some mystery around the background. Like you really don't know how far this beach goes on. You don't really know if there is an end, if there ever was an end, or if there's any other structures around. So I kind of wanted to add to the distance and loneliness that I feel this area has. Yes, Renaissance.
Yeah.
Jared, you can go first.
Okay.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because it creates like another thing to look at, like visually, and kind of builds on the concept. That's my type of talk.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, I was gonna say the materiality is really interesting. Like you bring up, like it's almost like a one-off piece or something that, like you can see like there's a huge amount of time taken care of, but it's on this, like I'm assuming it's done on paper, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's on newspaper, yeah.
Yeah, newspaper. So it's like very fragile. So I can just imagine this like being brushed, like it'd be easily damaged. But there, I'm really drawn to that. I'm drawn to the wrinkles and how it plays with this atmosphere. I'm interested in the mask of, I think, is it the God of Fear or is it False Security?
False Security.
False Security is like, I'm thinking a lot of the Plague Doctor, how they wore the masks, or the idea of the crow like kind of eating at fear. So it kind of has that double meaning. Yeah,
exactly. You know, Plague Doctor, the mask, while it did look like that, they were meant to help you. So that's why False Security is like, you would get that medical idea from them, but like you said, like a crow, you know, picking at and eating at, you know, the fear. And you mentioned when you talked about the material again, I also chose this because while it is really fragile, it's also super easy to repair. I mean, it's just paper. So, I mean, it can be repaired by just gesso and some more tape. And so that was kind of like a symbolism to me that like, while I felt that I was broken at this time, it wasn't like the end. I could work on it. I was rebuilding, and I was using this art to repair that broken time. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
No problem.
I wanted to say a thing that in your work, I really appreciate that in like specifically like these series and in your work that you use like newspaper and gesso, because like you transform that material that is seen as like, people have the thing where they think that like, oh, the better material on, the better the work, that you put your work and your meaning on material that is seen as like cheap or whatever, but you have like some deep and like rich meaning in like your pieces, especially in these, because they're so emotionally driven by like your state of mind and state of being, that it makes it more intriguing for me. Like I know like people are interested because they're like, they don't recognize it as like the standard of like what people usually put artwork on or their ideas. So it's very nice. Also, it seems like when you see this work and then when you realize that it's these like beautifully like done rendered figures and everything on like just newspaper and gesso, it feels like a very like quick way of working. Like, do you think like having your work on top of like newspaper and like gessoed newspaper helps with you getting your ideas out, or like the fact that it's like more accessible, like even in like whatever situation, because anyone can get like newspaper and gesso, like in theory?
Yeah. It's actually both of those things. I created these during a time where I was staying at my siblings' house in DC, and they had an abundance of newspapers, because even though no matter how many times they canceled, they would still get newspaper deliveries, and they were like, do you want these? Are you gonna do something with them? And I was like, sure. And so I started working on them just out of curiosity to see what it would have been like to start with magazines, and then I started to move on to newspaper. And I do have a sculpture background, and so it's really nice for me to build from nothing up, because originally I had quite a bit of a problem with just painting or drawing straight onto a canvas, onto regular paper, because I felt like I was not starting from the beginning. And so this really let me start from square one. I was literally building my canvas, and that was really important to my thought process. And it felt like I was putting like my all in from the beginning. All my emotion was going in from the moment I put the newspaper onto the wall. And so I felt that was really important to my process, because this was a healing process for me. So it was quite important to me to build it from the ground. Yeah.
Great. Well, we have tons and tons more pieces here to check out. So, would we like to move forward?
Yes, please.
All right. Close up. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Alt.
Yes. God of creation and consumption. Do you want anything on this, or do you guys want to just look at it for now and flip around until we come back?
I'm interested in hearing more on each and every one of these, but let's go through a little bit more real quick, and then we can come back to them and you can explain them further, because I am very interested in this one.
Yeah, this one's great. I love this one.
Yeah. The contrast is very beautiful in this between the background and your figure, which honestly in most of your pieces, I could say, is probably one of my favorite parts. But anyways, yeah, here I go. Let's Kriya, okay.
Close up.
Close up.
And that's the next piece.
All right. So let's keep on this real quick.
Okay. So this is all to the God of creation and consumption. So I found that when I'm creating, I often am like taking bits of myself to create. It's not like it comes from, nowhere. I often feel like especially in these pieces, I'm taking bits of my struggles and my mental health to create these pieces. And so it's like I'm taking it from my own head and like eating it again and like chewing it up to make something new. So it's like a weird, supposed to be like endless cycle of me like, consuming and then rebuilding my brain and then consuming it some more just to spit out new ideas. That's why there is like that piece of brain with like a little tag in it here and there of like new ideas. And so that was kind of like how it is. You are creating something beautiful, but often you have to go through some hard times to express these things. You have to like dig through your past. Some things are not really easy to talk about or easy to look back again. So it can be quite destructive, but in a way build something beautiful and help heal you. So that's what this piece is to me.
I mean, your message it's heard loud and clear in this. It's very well done. I'm getting some flashbacks to a couple of my favorite horror movies, specifically with Hannibal Lecter, so I can appreciate that.
Fair enough.
What would you say actually finding new content for yourself to create? What is a big inspiration for you in that? How do you go through that? Do you really just sit there and get incredibly like intro and like retrospective about things? Do you start thinking about your past a lot, or where does it come for you?
Sometimes it is thinking about my past. If there's something I feel like I need to dig into. There are plenty of times that I just needed it. I needed something to heal me, like especially if there's something like a particular holiday that brings up bad memories that really makes me feel like I need to put something out without necessarily talking about it. But other times, particularly for a lot of these creatures, a lot of these gods, is that these were creatures that I did see when I was unwell. And so like these were beings that kind of followed me around. And so a lot of them, while they were just created by my crazy little head, they were like very real to me. And so I kind of recycled them to give them to pinpoint their exact representations and reuse them in that way. A lot of my creatures do show up again. I do reuse them a lot, but sometimes it really is just me trying to, like I said, they tend to feel the emotion I'm trying to convey. So like in this case, like, you know, she feels the pain of, you know, consuming and creating. So I was trying to find a way to show pain, I guess, within that. So I guess I have to do a lot of brainstorming to figure out what the best way to do that. But usually I start with a certain pose I want to convey to get the emotion correct. Like I don't usually take a lot of different pictures of different poses. I tend to know which one I want to go with immediately. And so I think my brain starts with an outline of a figure first. And then from there, the idea of what it's going to mean later starts to form as I'm creating and building it. So I usually kind of start with an empty head, really. Just like an idea of a figure or of a certain material I want to paint, or a certain like, I don't know, like it usually starts with like something really vague and mundane. And then from there, I scribble in my sketchbook for a little too long about nothing and what forms I want to make sure I use. And I start taking photos, and whichever one I feel like feels right is when I go for. So I guess I don't know if that's really much of an answer, because it's kind of just like up in the air, kind of like I figure it out as I go, I guess.
No. I mean, I think it's interesting when you get to talk to artists. I feel like so many people, especially people who don't actually practice like any kind of artistic form, especially looking at works like yours, where there's an obvious motivation behind it, a psychological one. There's this idea that you just know what you want to make, that you already have this picture in your head and you just draw it once in a sketchbook, and then all of a sudden it becomes this massive painting or piece of work. But it's very different, as we've seen from artist to artist, and I'm excited to talk with each and every one of you on your creative processes, because what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's really cool to see how they do grow into something.
Yeah. I'm definitely like a secret kind of person when it comes to like when I have an idea and people ask me what my idea is. I'm super bad at like wanting to express that, because in my when I try to put it into words, I'm like, this is gonna sound crazy, so I don't want them to hear it because it's gonna sound stupid. So I just hold it in. I'm like, you'll see it, and then I just make it, and I'm like, this is what I wanted to do, because I'm so afraid of like it being judged on it, and not in people, because I guess I've had a lot of issues with people like underestimating like what I can handle, mostly in sculptures. Like if I was like, okay, I'm gonna work with wood stuff here. In high school I had some issues with like people being like, are you sure you know how to use the saw? And I'm like, yes, I know how to use the saw. So I never wanted to like tell them, because I was like, I don't feel like being underestimated. And so when it moved into like my painting, I just kind of held on to that, I guess. And so so now I got stuck in this weird loop of like scribbling an idea down, and someone asking me what it is, and I'm like, nothing, and I like, you know, hide it away and try to make it.
I feel like I'm very similar in my production and how I create art, which is hard, depending on like what type of career field you're trying to go into artistically, creatively. Everybody who knows me knows what I want to do. It's a lot more commercial, and you're going to have people asking you every bit of the way of like, how's this look? And when you're talking to people who aren't artistic, don't understand the artistic process, if you can't give them something like right off the bat, they get very frustrated with you. And it's hard to work with people on a level like that when they ask something of you, and it's like, I'm trying to show you what I can right now. You just have to keep in mind, this is not the end result. Like, there's more to this. I just can't convey it to you properly until it's done.
Yeah, it's something I need to work on. I mean, I'm going into illustration, and you know, you really have to be okay with showing your step-by-step process, and that's going to be hard for me, because I don't like to do that. So yeah, it's definitely something that works for some, not for all.
I
Yeah.
think it's like a trade. I think it's like a trade-off between the two. So, for instance, I can see it being a good thing that you don't really reveal it to people, but it's also like a bad thing as well because you're also hindering feedback. For me, I personally struggle with it both ways because, like you said, people view you differently. It's like, are you sure you want to do this idea? And it's just like, yeah. And sometimes, like, I tell people, like, my work, like, if I could just make artwork and not have to speak about my work, I would love that because it's often hard to talk about these things with actual words. So it's just like I'd rather let my artwork speak than myself speak. And this one particularly, I'm just thinking about social media like right now and how it's just very consuming, and it's just like I've had often like days where I'm just like I need to delete this right now, but I can't because it's what's keeping me in the loop of what's happening around the world right now. But it's just like it's like a double-edged sword, and like I'm kind of scared for what it's gonna be like for like if we have kids, like what it's going to be like, it's going to be multiplied more.
Yeah.
But that's what I think about with this piece, like buying in, like the figures looking like it's both looks like it's unconscious, but also conscious. It's just eating away slowly and it's just deteriorating at its brain. That's why I'm really drawn into this figure.
I mean, there's always a cost to creation. You can't have creation without there being destruction.
Yeah.
And that is a very hard thing for artists a lot of times. So much of us coming up with a creative process and how we want to do something, it really sucks. And as artists, a lot of times we place so much of ourselves and who we are onto the fact that we make art.
Yeah.
Less into that, we're just deserving as human beings of things. And more like I need to be, if I'm not a good artist, then what am I?
Exactly. Yeah.
It really eats away at you.
It does.
And I've had people personally who have just recently started like getting into artistic processes, and they're finding that out like right off the bat and how crappy it can make you feel. And it's like as much as it is, even if you want to do it as a hobby, eventually the creation, it takes a part of you. I think it's an important thing to realize as an artist.
Yeah. Especially if something doesn't come together. There's so many times that like I just want to draw and I like go to my sketchbook and I draw something and I'm like, well, this is shit. And I just like close it. I'm like, I'm never gonna be an artist again. This is it. My career's over. Like it's just so easy to just like let something so small get to you as an artist, because you're just like, if this one thing doesn't come out, I'm done. I'm done for, like it's so hard to I don't know. It's so hard to to accept failure, I think, in the art world, because I feel like people are always criticizing you. People are always expecting you and waiting for you to fail, I think, because everyone just kind of is like, you'll never make it in the art world. So when you kind of fail at one thing, it feels like, well, they were right. I'm done,
Yeah, it goes with the social media thing. As much as it's been a kind of godsend to artists in promoting themselves, when you see a very talented person constantly putting content out there, and you've been struggling for a week on just figuring out a new piece you want to do, it sucks. It's heartbreaking and it's overwhelming. But it goes back to like even art, like all art. When people show you their final product, that's like the snapshot of like things going good, of the good part of the process. You're not seeing the turmoil behind it, and we need to remember that.
Yeah, I wanted to say a thing earlier. One of like the best advice I've ever received from any of like my like elders, like teachers or people like that, is to create a lot of like bad art. Like create just the urge to create and like the want to is like what drives us as artists. Like we do this because we want to. We choose this career path. And then that just getting all your ideas out, however they come. You can always come back and revise an idea or something, but just creating is the most important part. And I just remember someone like my teacher telling me, create a lot of bad art. Just make as much bad art as you can, because within that bad art comes ideas that you can elevate and like improve on. So I think whatever work you go through, even if like people have whatever opinions they have, just create it, because it doesn't matter what other people necessarily think. It's your work and your like opinions, and you should just get them out however you can. And if you want to improve them, then you ask for like critique and help and things that you like want from feedback from other people to help improve your meaning and like conveying your meaning to make sure that other people understand what you're trying to say in your work, no matter if it like is good or whatever, because like you want to make sure that it's like it's what you want to say.
Yeah, I think that's really important for a lot of artists to hear. I think especially because I mean the art world is so filtered. You don't get to really see like the behind the scenes, the bad, the mess ups, the scribbles. And so I think that's what makes it so exciting. Like when, a big artist will have a show of just like their sketchbook and everyone's like, oh my God, I can see their thought process, And so I think it really is important to get that out there to to make that bad work so you can really form those great ideas and work off of them. I think it's just, I know especially for me, it's so scary to show your bad ideas because you think it's going to reflect how people think about your actual work. You're like, oh, they're going to think I make this bad art all the time, And so I think it's so hard to show like, a bad sketch, a bad idea. Cause the whole time I'm trying to like preface, like, this is just a sketch. Like, this is not the finished product. Like, don't worry about the lines or whatever. And so I think it's really important that we like grow confident in our ideas and our bad art, just to, part of the process.
There's this quote I created in high school, and I think you could learn by it. It's called "Don't impress just to impress. Impress yourself." Meaning, so like you should never want to be doing something in order to impress somebody. Like the first person you should want to impress is yourself. At the end of the day, like look back at a piece and be like, wow, I really did that. Like I think it's always interesting for an artist to like make a piece and just sit back with the work and see, I really created this piece. So I think that's something that we all can think about when creating work. It's just like not caring what an audience will think at the end of the day, because like you're doing this for yourself and for nobody else, because what's the point of doing this work if you just want to please others rather than please yourself?
Oh, that's important. I like that.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next one here.
This is Liana's piece. She owns this.
I actually own this piece because I love it so much. You
so
go ahead and explain it.
Yes. Okay. So this is Kriya, the god of identity and perception. And as soon as I posted this on Instagram, Liana was like, that's mine. And I was like, okay. She snatched that real quick. And what's that?
That sounds about like Liana.
Yeah, she wanted that quick. So this is the god of identity and perception. So this is kind of like, she's kind of basking in the moonlight, and she's allowing her facade to be lifted to see the true self, I guess. And I guess what I was trying to do here was talk about like your inner identity, not necessarily like how you identify like on the outside, how you want people to perceive you, but more about like your personality perception, how you want people to think of you and how you think of you. So I struggled for a long time with allowing myself to be completely seen. I was very quiet. I didn't really share a lot about myself. And so this was kind of me and like revealing, just allowing it to spill, I guess. So I guess it's kind of like opening the shell, I guess, to allow my true self to also get a taste of the moonlight, get a taste of the real world, the outside world. So so that's what this piece really means to me.
I have something.
Yeah.
I took this class, the sociology or social science class.
Did you take the class?
I did take the class. And it was great, but there was this really interesting thing by actress Tandy Newton, and she was talking about her struggle with the self. And with this piece, it reminds me of when she was saying that truly yourself is not a physical thing. Yourself is a concept, essentially. It's something that only people other than you see or what you want yourself to see. And this like is I read it differently. I read it, it's like pretty dark. It's really great, by the way.
Thank you.
But just like the idea that who am I? Like
Yeah.
that's sort of the feeling that I get. And like with the layering and the multiple arms, it sort of like it's like fighting with like how you see yourself and how others see yourself.
Yeah, that is definitely a part of this piece. I think it's why I included it as like not just my self-identity, but how people perceive me. And so that's something that I did battle with a lot, especially with my inner thoughts. Because, like a lot of these pieces are quite dark. They're not, happy, dance in a field pieces. And so it was often hard for me to allow myself to just let it go there without filtering it, be like, oh, I think this is too much. I think, I don't think people are going to understand it, or this is going to be too dark for an audience. And so this was kind of just letting that darkness out. And kind of just showing that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of me, and everyone has their darkness. It's just like being willing to let it out. And you can see like, these are like these flat discs that are my eyes that are, had to peer through the mask. So it's like my inner self just watching me kind of, be a fake person, I guess, be a fake human. This was made the same year that I came out. So a couple of months prior was when I finally came out as a lesbian. And so this was also me kind of releasing a lot of that, was just kind of like letting me really, touch the air, like letting myself really release. And so this is not really like a piece that's just about, the good coming out. This is about everything coming out, the bad, the negative, and the positive. Yeah. That's what that is for me. Yeah.
Personally,
That's really powerful. Sorry.
It is very powerful. I think of as far as everything I've seen so far and I've looked at for myself, originally I would say Melissa was probably one of my favorite pieces. Mostly just for the composition of the piece and the beautiful movement of the form. But after seeing all of these, I guess, in succession, they're all very dark. They're all very truthful and kind of grimy and grungy.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of like breaks the pattern of, to me, this feels calm. This is like a moment of like release.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what
it's like a release.
Good or bad. It's just it's calm and there's nothing more to it.
Yeah.
But that release.
Yeah.
How do we?
Yeah.
I feel like because I've been looking at the eyes and like I don't want this to come off as an offensive way either, but they're almost kind of like, cartoon-like.
Yeah.
And I think I was thinking originally how I wasn't sure if I was crazy about it or not. But with further discussion and an understanding behind it, it's changed. But because I was thinking originally, like, well, what if you went for something like more grotesque or something for the eyes or more realistic? And now I think, like I said, the way you chose to depict them, it changes the mood.
Yeah.
But this mood of calm is needed.
Yeah.
As a small break within these pieces.
Yeah, I originally did think about, a more grotesque or more realistic, but I also wanted to contrast the seriousness of the faceplate. It shows a very like serious, monotone face, and I didn't want it to be just like, oh, on the inside are just like organs, because that's not necessarily what this was about. It was not about like the physical inner body. It was about, the mental inner body. And I like to think that the blackness inside is not just darkness, but also like kind of like a slime. It sucks up and embodies like the good and the bad.
It's the first thing your eyes are drawn to. Obviously, it's the darkest part of the piece.
Yeah. it's like that's the darkest that gets on here. I think I just used flat ink there. Everything else is washed, but that's like flat ink.
Yeah. Which I think brings up a good question. Would anybody be, just playing like devil's advocate here, would anybody be interested in seeing that amount of darkness or contrast in other places throughout the piece? Or do we feel that it's needed for the overall metaphor? Or do we want to see more for the sake of balance?
I think it's very important where the darkness is centered in this piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. I think it also creates that balance between like the darkness and of the hollowness, and then the complete white of the moon right there. So my eye automatically bounces the darkness, and then it bounces back over to the moon.
Mm-hmm. Also, there are words and like things on in like the middle right part of the thing. Can you explain those?
Yeah, okay, so that's actually my tattoo that lovely Jared did for me. So it's a sculpture with a 4, and so this is part of the identity thing. So because these pieces are 2D, this was kind of like a moment where I was, finally like really letting myself do more than just be a sculptor. I still think I am a sculptor. I feel like I built this, from the ground up. I still consider this, sculpture to me. But I wanted to like express in this work that this is part of my identity, and that the words are backwards and they are like in bits and pieces. So like I wanted to show that like, while this is part of me, this is not all of me, that's why I did incorporate it on the correct wrist there, like where it would have been. Yeah, I think that was just like a way of me expressing a bit of my identity. It was important enough to me that I got it literally tattooed on my wrist. So yeah, it's just a little bit of, I guess, like the me that people can see on the outside.
Lovely.
I think what's interesting about like what Jerry was saying about self is that you can't really define self, because self is always changing no matter what it is, like from when you were born to when you die. And I think what's interesting also about self is that nobody really understands it. Like I still don't even understand myself, or people, like you can even be in a relationship with somebody and they still will never understand the true definition of that self, because they're always changing. And I think people have to be okay with not being able to understand a person completely. And there's a sense of joy not wanting to know everything about yourself, because it can bring both happiness and sadness. So I think there needs to be like a duality or a balance between like the happiness and the sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, well, after this, I think we should like move on a little more, because I want to get to the Titans things before we run out of time. The Titan series.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
I was gonna say, because this piece resonates with me so much as like a person who dissociates often. This is like backtracking to when you mentioned like what like the darkness and the color field of like the actual face and the pose, and how it is like a calming thing. Because how when people like stargaze, like this person, like this figure, this god is like stargazing into the void, but they themselves, I think of like that face as like a void of like their interior, like everything, and the eyeballs are just like floating on top of it, because it feels like a very like flat thing.
Perfect word choice. Void is my word. That's also tattooed on me.
Yes, so it's like a void staring into another void, because when people stargaze, they're literally just like in that deepness. So it feels like that deepness inside of like this whole being, but but it's all you see that's light is like the eyes instead of like stars or something. So I just really like that choice, because it feels like the choice of like the figure and how they're laying and their whole everything about this. Yeah. Because of like things like that, like the fact that it looks like they're staring into a void, that themselves are like this internal like endless being inside themselves, and that kind of like reflects what like people think of as like themselves and their perception, because your perception of yourself can be endless. And I think that's like a really important thing that like people can like think about.
Guys, like this conversation is hitting my core. I think this is what I needed mentally.
It's too real right now. It's too real.
Okay.
But we need it.
Yes. True.
We do.
It's very important. Okay. Moving on. Oh, this one. This one's
Yeah.
okay. So one is lovely, and I just love the way
Yeah.
that you morph like the two like big I don't know figures and morph them to. I don't know if that's the right wording, but yeah. Can you explain this one further, please? Hello.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, she froze.
N'Kai.
She froze.
No!
No, she froze.
If you can please further explain fate.
Yes. Okay. So this is Fate, the god of loss and rejection. So this is actually about my absent father. So this is like when I was younger, I kind of went through this issue where I was like, is there something wrong with me? Is there a reason why he like, you know, is not part of my life? I went through like a weird time where like he kind of made it feel like it was my fault that we weren't connected, no matter how old I was, whether I was like literally like 5 or if I was, you know, 11 or 12. I haven't seen him in like 10 years in person, so whatever. But so this was like a moment where like I really had a hard time trying to figure out like why, like if it was my fault. And so I wanted to really mirror that little time in my life. And so actually the model for the dog that's morphed with me is actually my older sibling's dog, Bridget. She's lovely. I love her. So
This is my next question. Who's the
Yeah.
dog?
so that's my little niece. I love her dearly. So she hung out with me a lot while I was working. So I was like, I need a dog. Oh, hello, you'll do. So Fate is actually I do have the sculpture version if you want to see her. Hold on, let me figure out where.
Yes,
heck-
please.
Give me one
Please.
second.
Please. I want to see it.
This piece is also interesting because it doesn't exactly read its meaning. Like in the identity and the piece beforehand, Kriya, you go, ooh, I remember that one.
Yeah, I made her over break.
I'll have
it
to
was fun.
hear another time when I'm not presenting.
Yeah.
Yes, you'll see it.
But yeah, so that's Fate. But yeah, it was pretty much about like a monster that had no place, that felt rejected, that felt lost. This was actually a really fun piece for me to make. I really enjoyed this. This is actually at my older sibling's house. They wanted this one, which is fair because I mean it is their dog and that too. So yeah, so it's part of that about my dad, but also about like me rejecting who I really was at a time. There was a time where like before I did come out, I was rejecting who I really was. I was pretending to not be gay. I was just like, I am straight. Hello. I like the men. And so there was a time where I was like rejecting my own personality, rejecting myself. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I was trying to correct that. Which is weird because I went to an all arts high school where pretty much everyone was gay, and still I was like, I am not a gay, and so so this was kind of about that as well, just like rejecting myself, but also having others reject me.
Okay, interesting. I'm fascinated. I like this piece because it's like normally you have to focus whenever you're doing a figure drawing of somebody like so much on getting proportions correct and everything, but it's just a completely made up creature.
Yeah, which is my favorite thing.
Nothing has to really be proportionate to one another in itself, and then yet in a lot of ways it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like you could see this creature walking around. It's it would be horrifying, but
I think she's beautiful.
I mean, I might be scared shitless at first, and then if she started talking to me and I was like, wow, she's got a great personality, I mean, you can stay.
I will say this. I think what's interesting about your work, N'Kai, is that it's very proportional. So like like being a drawing major and knowing how like the body works, like I think where it falls in between like being real, like anatomically correct in like being like a cartoon, because like here you have like this really sharp black line, but you have these proportional figures, so it's like the in between, so it's like the best of both worlds, which I really like about your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you always you're very good at showing form, not only through shadow and like value, but also through line. Your line work is very well done.
Thank you.
Because normally it's like you see it's either one way or the other, and sometimes using both it can really clash and it looks out of place. But I think you've found that nice happy medium.
Yeah, this was really experimental for me. So I did struggle with that when I was creating them. As you can tell from the very beginning, my first work is not as successful as I would say as this one, which is the last piece I created. I like was really experimenting with materials. It was the first time I was using China marker, which for the longest time I despised because I thought they were kind of similar to crayon, and I hate crayons. But then I ended up kind of falling in love with them, and then so I was using pretty much India ink and China marker almost solely. So it really was like me experimenting with materials and figuring out how I wanted to how I wanted to show these creatures. Like, I mean, the dark line was really hard for me to put in at first because I was unsure of, you know, how that would look in the end. And once you put a big black line in your work, it's kind of there, you know, it's not really easy to get rid of. So it definitely was really experimental, and I started to end up falling in love with it later.
You got to be a brave person to use any kind of ink, honestly. Yeah. Like that's permanent.
It's scary, I'll tell you what.
It really is scary. I love India.
Yes.
One more thing before we move on, I just wanted to say to this creature personally, like you're the real champ for sitting through 6 nipple piercings from what I see.
Yeah, it was a tough time. She tells me about it all the time. You know, 6 is rough, man. Not recommended.
I also wanted to ask before we moved on to the next series, because I know the next series is in a different medium. How your like general like process for these went, because I know you mentioned like you did ink wash and that you used India ink and like a China marker, but like how would you like summarize like your process for these?
My process was quite rhythmic. Like I found that once I got the hang of my materials, I pretty much did the same pattern for all of my works. I was able to see them before they were finished. So like I knew what I needed to do. So like I usually started out with, of course I've made the canvas. The canvas size was kind of just like whatever I felt was right. And for some of them, I went very large, which is kind of a bad idea if you're living in like one room in someone's house. So I often had to like, you know, put up a huge canvas and for like Melissa, it was like behind the door. So like, it was like a really odd space to be making anything. And I would tape up the individual pieces of newspaper, tape them all together through like on the lines, and then tape around the outside of the canvas, and then just sew it up. Sometimes I would do like a thick gesso if I really didn't want to show any of the lines. Like in this one, you don't really see much of the tape lines. I kind of didn't want them to disrupt the figure, which is already complicated enough. And then some of them, I really want you to see them, so the gesso is a lot thinner. And then from there, really light sketching. Sometimes I didn't sketch at all. I just went for the background shading, and then China marker shading, ink washing, and then final line work. So I couldn't do the ink wash in the background in the beginning because I didn't always know where my figures were going to start and end. Sometimes I added some things, you know, a little later. So I didn't want to do a dark background and then have to, you know, let's say I didn't want to put a tail in, and I put a tail in now. So I really had to be careful about where the ink fell. So I was like sitting there with a paper towel. Like every time it would go a little bit off where I wanted, I had to like stop it like really quick. And so it was a really hard process to get the hang of. Sometimes I would do the ink lining first because that would sometimes stop the water from falling where I didn't want it. But it was quite the obsessive process. I had to be there for like every second of it. There wasn't any time where my mind kind of like explored or kind of journeyed. I had to be like really present, yeah, for just to make sure, because because with ink, once it's there, it really is there, you know. So if I didn't want, if I really didn't want something there, like a certain line to spill, like it was really, like, it would just disrupt my whole like mind state. Like if a line went through something I didn't want, I would just like, you know, like it was too much. So I had to be present for it.
All right, let's move on now.